Welcome to the Organic Wine Podcast. Hi, this is Adam Huss coming to you from Los Angeles. Thanks for joining. Deanna and Alfie Alcantara don't like to see wasted potential, and they see lots of potential in the wealth of America's endemic grape species. Not only potential for new vines that are adapted for the climate in which they're grown, don't need to be sprayed with chemicals, and make wines that truly reflect their land, but also potential for engaging and involving all kinds of people, especially those who might feel excluded or marginalized by the dominant Euro-centered wine culture. So Deanna and Alfie have started a project to revive, refine, and redefine the native grape and wine cultures of America. They found a piece of property in the Catskill Mountains of New York, and they begun planting vines from grape species that contain native DNA, some new varieties that aren't even named yet, and others with names like Black Eagle and America, and still others that they found growing wild on their property. They are at the beginning of a project that can take many, many years to begin to see the impact of their efforts. I think there's something brave and hopeful about starting something that can take longer than the years you've been given on this earth. And I think these are the kind of projects that we all need desperately now. So I hope Deanna and Alfie will inspire us to think about what is important enough for us to give our lives to, even if we know we won't see the results. Oh, and I forgot to mention, their name for this project is Dear Native Grapes. Maybe that's where they get their inspiration, because what they've started is something much more meaningful than a business plan. They've started writing a love letter. Enjoy. Alfie and Deanna, thank you so much for having this conversation. Welcome.
Thanks for having us, Adam.
It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting us.
Man, it's honestly my pleasure, and I want to start before I jump over my own thoughts and sort of paint a picture here at the beginning that as an outsider myself who got a glimpse of this project that you've just started, that, so that this will hopefully be the first of several conversations. But I just want to paint this picture. So Wendy and I recently, took Centralis on the road. We went to New York a couple weeks ago, and during our visit, we stayed in an Airbnb near Walton, New York. And on this beautiful, breezy, sunny morning, we drove out into the countryside outside Walton, which is already itself pretty far out into the countryside. And we wound our way up to your farm. Is farm the right word yet?
Sure.
Yeah.
There's a barn on the property. I think that qualifies, right?
Yeah, we call it the farm.
Yeah.
And met you guys in the best possible way at the top of a sort of mountainside that was an open slope sloping down to this forested valley below, with views of the rolling mountains in the distance around. And on this mountainside, you have planted at least 20 different varieties of literally like native, some of them to that forested valley below your property, at the bottom of your property, and some of the hybrid native varieties that have been around for a while, and some new ones that you're checking out. And we had the honor of planting some Vitis estivalis, just one part of a row, because it took us forever because we're slow diggers.
No, you were
great. But it was such a treat, honestly. And that's where you are, and that's what you're doing. And I just want to talk a little bit about how that all got there. Like, obviously all the vines are babies, so you guys have a long way to go, but this is a really exciting project for many reasons. I got to know you through your Instagram channel. Channel is totally the wrong word, and Wendy is going to make fun of me for saying that. But your Instagram account called Dear Native Grapes. So maybe that's a good place for you guys to start about what's Dear Native Grapes mean.
Well, Adam, it was awesome that you and Wendy got to come out, and we got to actually, it was not even noon, and we were already tasting some good wine you brought down from the Finger Lakes, which is great.
Yeah. That was nice.
Yeah, it was.
You need wine to work, right? Especially in a vineyard.
Yeah, I've heard that's how they do it in France, maybe.
And in New York, apparently.
Yeah, but Dear Native Grapes is kind of our experimental vineyard. It's looking to bring back these forgotten, almost lost grape varieties from around the American landscape. And it's, as romantics, it's our love letter to them. Hence, Dear Native Grapes. It's the start of a story. And that's kind of where we're at. We're at the start of this very long journey, but it's just kicked off. We're in our infancy, just like our baby vines.
That's beautiful. I love the romantic aspect of that. What? So that says a little bit about you. Could you say more about the two of you? How did you end up there, and where are you from, and where are you from, and what's your background?
Well, I grew up in Mexico City, and I met Deanna while we were both in college in New York. I had moved up to New York City, and we were both in film school. And we actually didn't meet until literally the last week of school. We were in the same class for 4 years, had the same friends and everything, and we just never crossed paths. And it was our friend who was shooting his thesis film, and it was like a Lord of the Rings esque type story in the woods of upstate New York, and I was the cameraman on it, and Deanna was the assistant director, and that's how we met on set. And
Nice.
it's kind of how we fell in love.
Gosh, it sounds like this is the connection to why you're talking to Los Angeles right now. I feel like you're just part of the LA tribe right now.
I wish. So Deanna, she's a through and through New Yorker.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Staten Island.
Hey,
Schooling out there, went to the city for college. But yeah, my whole family's tri-state, which is New
nice.
Jersey, Connecticut, and New York. And yeah, Alfie and I crossed paths, and we started dating immediately, and we've been together since 2010.
I love that. So you had film at the beginning as a common denominator. When did wine enter the picture?
I think it was kind of a collection of moments and experiences that started opening our eyes. I was a plant nerd when I was young. I was obsessed with carnivorous plants when I was little. I made my parents like drive me to like some faraway plant nurseries in Mexico when I was growing up, and I had good parents. And
well, if you ever visit Los Angeles, of course you have a place to stay here. But I don't know, maybe you already know this, but the Arboretum has an entire greenhouse dedicated to carnivorous plants here.
Oh my God.
Whoa.
In Santa Anita. Yeah. It's amazing. It's
No,
like you walk into a jungle and you're afraid because you
That's
might
awesome.
get eaten. It's amazing.
I love it.
Well, it hasn't gone away, but we've definitely moved on to other
plants.
horticultural
Yeah.
interests, if you will. But yeah, I was a plant nerd, so I loved plants. I loved working outside. I loved working with dirt. But then moved to New York City and didn't have that possibility anymore. Like I just like a lot of New Yorkers, you like dream of having an outdoor space, even a balcony or fire escape to like have like a pot of something there. But before I moved to New York, I went to boarding school in Colorado, and that was awesome because it was a very much a outdoor experience where I really learned to love nature and learned to be outside and just get that nurture that part of I guess like my spirit. But yeah, the contrast between Colorado and New York was pretty stark, and so I definitely like wanted to figure out a way. But I got like pretty I got pretty focused on my career. I'm a cameraman by trade, and so I was laser focused on that, on film school, etc. And once Deanna and I were dating, we were living together. I think it was when we started going to June Wine Bar in Carroll Gardens. We started drinking natural wine. That must have been like 4 years ago or something like that, three years ago. And we made friends with the staff. They were awesome there, and they started really opening our eyes to what natural wine was, and producers who were from unlikely places, grapes that were obscure and we'd never heard about, but they were just fascinating to drink. And do you want to talk about when we started seriously looking at this? We took
Yeah, it kind of all culminated in like a trip we took to Maryland for New Year's. And I unfortunately got a stomach bug while we were there, and I was sick, very scarily, deeply sick. And I
Oh
was holed
boy.
up in a bathroom for most of New Year's Day. But
Uh,
Alfie was taking care of me, and I was like in bed all day, and I felt so bad. We were at friends' places. So when I was sleeping, Alfie would go on these little hikes around the neighbor's property, and he stumbled upon this like old forgotten tiny vineyard, and they were pulling it out, they were ripping out all the vines. um, and Alfie had like chatted with the team that was there, and they were like, yeah, these are grapes that just won't grow here. And Alfie's like, but why? And he just kind of like latched onto this nugget of information that like here was this beautiful thing that was being ripped out, and for what reason. And like he kind of went down a rabbit hole that night, being like, well, what grape variety was this, and can we do better? And I think that's when you stumbled upon Munson's book.
Yeah, it was it was this really picturesque little vinifera vineyard in southern Maryland, and they just like gave up on it because it was impossible to grow it without intensive chemical agriculture, and they were like, we're
right.
done.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what led us to find Munson's book, Foundations of American Grape Culture, is what I think it's called. And that just led us down this rabbit hole of like, oh, like America had a ton of grape growing pre-prohibition, like 1800s. There was a lot of innovation happening, and all that kind of stopped after prohibition. And then there was never an opportunity to kind of retake it and continue that
Reignite
work.
it,
Yeah.
yeah.
And so a lot of that knowledge either got lost or was still there, but it was just forgotten.
It was dormant, just like some of these varieties that were almost lost.
Is it too harsh for me to say about that vineyard that they were pulling up good riddance?
I mean, maybe, yeah. I mean, it's also like a pretty, it's a pretty clear indicator too that like,
Right.
vinifera didn't want to grow there.
Yeah.
You can't force it. Um,
Yeah.
you're talking about high disease pressure and a plant that is, despite being beautiful and having the ability to create something beautiful, like, is not possibly meant to be there.
Right.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
kicked off trying to find out, well, what would grow here. I've never heard of grape varieties that would grow kind of in this colder climate, and that's when we were like, oh wait, people are doing this. It's just they're kind of in the fringes. They're experimenting, just like we're looking to do. And so there were these like hints of this going on in Vermont and in the Finger Lakes, and that's when we decided to kind of really dive in. Alfie had been talking to me about this again and again. He was like, oh, this is so cool. Why aren't people doing it? Where can we find more of these like native or hybrid grape varieties? And he kept talking and talking. And finally I was like, well, why don't we turn this into a reality? Why don't we like kickstart this dream and like get it laid out on paper? Let's see what it would cost to like buy some land and plant some grapes and like bring these varieties back. And Alfie's eyes just like lit up, and he was like, yes. He's like, of course, like, why didn't I think of this? And so really soon right after that, we enrolled in some Cornell courses about how to build a business plan and a financial plan we would actually go to June, the wine bar in Brooklyn, where we first discovered a lot of natural wines. And we started writing out our business plan in a corner table. We just bring our laptops and like drink wine and work. And maybe it was an excuse to go drink natural wine,
No.
but we'd spend hours there just like hashing out like, what does this mean to us? What are our values around it? Like, why do we want to do this? And how practically do we do this? And so
Deanna put us on a very aggressive savings plan. We moved to a cheaper apartment further in Brooklyn to save on rent. We basically put in almost our entire paycheck would go into our savings account to like, we were like, let's save on a down payment for some farmland and like just like bite the bullet. We would still go to June every Sunday, but like we were like let's aggressively save, and like we did that for a few years while we were like doing the research, doing the work. But like Deanna's the one that like put it into action. I would still be talking about it like if it weren't for her.
Well, that sounds like a great partnership. I love that. Well, since you did this work, you should have like ready answers then for, yeah, I mean, you've just set yourself up to be asked, why are you doing this? What is your vision? What are the values behind this? What were your answers to those, and have they changed, or are you still living that?
No, absolutely. It's something that we talk about literally every day, and it's this idea of taking what's there. In this case, this country's wealth in endemic plant species in agriculture, and doing the best we can with it to make something beautiful and something meaningful. I think that one of the things we talk about a lot is like the idea of wasted potential is so painful to me. I don't like to see when something goes by the wayside that has potential, and we see this country's grape varieties as something that has so much potential to be explored still, and is like just at its very infancy. And so that's, I think, what excites us and what gets us going.
And I think
Yeah.
for me, a little bit more on that is like sometimes the wine industry can feel inaccessible, or it's you have to have a baseline of knowledge or foundation to walk into a wine shop or to drink different types of wine. And we really wanted to break that down. Like, I am by no means full of top knowledge of every wine region and what grapes always come from where. And I'm still learning, and like that's okay. And like we should make wine that allows people to ask questions about where did it come from, why are we planting it, and just like open up that entire sector. Like, let's make wine more accessible so people feel like it's not something that they need for a fancy dinner. It's something you could drink with breakfast. It's something you can have with friends at a barbecue. It's something that is for the people. It's not for this higher echelon.
Yeah, much.
That diversity of grape that we've almost lost. Like, let's bring that diversity back into our grape varieties. Why exclude these native and hybrid grapes when they have so much potential?
Yeah, I mean, I think if we're building a culture that reflects terroir, I mean, when I was there visiting, when Wendy and I were just there visiting, we stayed on another property a little closer to the Finger Lakes than you guys are, and it was like over 100-acre property, and so we just spent a lot of time. I mean, I spent a lot of time wandering around the woods and edges of woods, and I came back with just like hundreds of pictures of native grapes climbing the edge of things, like climbing the edge of the forest, climbing the edge of these ponds, climbing the edges. They're everywhere. They're literally like, I mean, that world that you live in there on the East Coast is teeming with grapes, and it makes sense that those would be the grapes that you'd start working with if you were starting out. I almost feel like we're at like a really great moment in history for this project that you guys are embarking on, in that, we basically imported a foreign culture of winemaking and grape growing from Europe. And in the last, I mean, to have the current, wine culture that we have in the US. And over the last, 50 years, viticultural techniques uh, and winemaking techniques as well, but especially viticultural techniques, have really advanced to the point that, I think we could have rapid understanding of what the potential is and how to adapt these vines now in a much faster way, and how to, I guess breed is one of the words that you would use, but how to just sort of, keep shaping, keep selecting for the characteristics that we need. And also, with the rise of natural wine, I think people are open to these new things, like for the first time since wine sort of became a thing in the US. It's been French dominant for up until now, literally. And now people are like, and there's this whole other world besides France, and different flavors. It doesn't just have to be varietally correct Cabernet, it can be a million different things. You can make a million different wines just from Cabernet that don't taste anything like Cabernet, let alone all the other grape species and varieties that are out there. Sorry, I'm going off, but
It was
that is to
beautiful.
say, I think you guys really have started something really beautiful. I mean, how do you plan to approach the sort of time aspect of this? The fact that you have, you're like, we think of the monks as having perfected Pinot and Burgundy over, hundreds and hundreds of years. Where do you guys fit into that time frame, and how do you see that playing out where you guys are? Where is that? Where are you on the time frame?
Totally. Yeah. I think we're in the not, the very, very start of something. And it's cool to see a community already building on it. Friends that we see on Instagram that have a similar project going or are interested in this, they start to do a small planting of hybrid or native varieties. It's, in our lifetime, we're probably gonna, maybe we find the no spray grape for our bioregion where we are in the Catskills, and like that's the wine that we make for the next 40, 50 years, however long.
Yeah.
um, that would be cool,
60.
um, but
You'll
yeah,
live to
it's like
120, hopefully.
like you said, it took how many thousands of years to cultivate Vitis vinifera. Like we're just scratching the surface on North American varieties.
Right.
And especially some of the North American varieties are barely touched, in terms of cultivation. uh,
Yeah.
there was a lot of work done back in the day with, for example, a native species called Vitis labrusca. And Labrusca has a very specific flavor profile, and the hybrids that were developed from that kind of carry that. Uh, and some people like it, some people don't. But Labrusca is one of probably a dozen prevalent native grape species in the U.S. And so, it's cool to see work being done horticulturally with the other grape species that didn't have a chance yet. So it's like it's
Right.
just getting started, and that's what's really cool about it.
Now, can I ask you guys, I mean, just to give a sense of this for anybody who's not aware, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, I mean, all of the grapes that we know or have known as wine that come from Europe, whether it's Sangiovese, Nebbiolo, Nerello Muscalese, if you're in Italy, whether it's Syrah, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Chenin Blanc, Cabernet, Sauvignon Blanc, Riesling, every grape literally is the same species. It's literally Vitis vinifera, and it's basically varieties within that species.
Correct.
And here we have like 23 in North America. I mean, it might not all be right where you guys are, but you probably have dozens, like you said. But in North America, I know we have over 20 species of grapes, and so you think of like the potential that Europe discovered over thousands of years in one species. We have 23 species to explore. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
It's like it's an amazing, amazing potential, as you're talking about.
Exactly. And you know, and so do they. And you know, it's cool to see a lot of viticulture in Europe already starting to look at that,
Yeah, yeah.
exploring different hybrids. Also,
Porto just approved
yeah,
for the AOC. They just approved new varieties,
yeah,
new hybrid
exactly.
varieties. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that. That's awesome.
Amazing. I
Uh,
mean, that's the brilliance of like what you guys should do. I'm just going to throw this out there. The brilliance of France is you name your wine for a region. We totally screwed up, and we were like, oh no, we're going to name it for the variety. So now the French are actually going to charge us royalties to use their grape names for real. That you guys know about this, right? They're going to charge us royalties to use the grape names Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's like a requirement. Like if you go to create a label, you have to say what it is, unless you just call it red table wine. And so what we should start doing is naming our wines for regions. So you guys should be whatever region you should start the AVA, and that's good, should be what the wine should be called, not a grape name. Like, and then when you change in 100 years, because the climate is now, instead of being, like a temperate mid-Atlantic, sort of whatever you guys have there, it'll be what, who knows what it'll be in 100 years, a desert maybe. um you could just change the grapes and keep the same name. It won't
right.
matter. You can still be the the dear native grapes for wine.
So wild to think about.
It is. I hope it doesn't turn into a desert there. I
Me
hope
We're banking on it.
at least not in your lifetime. Well, yeah. So let's talk about what you are growing there. Like, what's in the ground, and what do you have planned?
Yeah, so we started planting actually in 2020. Um, and some of that during COVID, which was, we bought the land in 2019. We always had this plan to get all these baby vines into the ground in June of 2020, and then COVID came along and we had to kind of readjust our priorities, readjust our plans. But we were really lucky to have a few family and friends who would get tested, we would get tested, and they came out in just small groups to kind of help us push forward and realize that dream. So we're so indebted to them, because that year we planted, I believe, over like 18 different varieties, and this year we planted another acre of about, I think, another 6. So we have about 24 different varieties of grapes. Some are these
Wow.
pre-prohibition varieties from the Hudson Valley, like Empire State, Golden Drop, Black Eagle. And then there are more
Oh, I love
pre-prohibition
those
but
names.
heritage North American varieties like Delaware and Catawba, and one named America.
Yeah.
And then there are these newer hybrids from Minnesota, Frontenac, Itasca. Some of you've surely heard of Marquette, Brianna.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think some of the things that we're really interested are these experimental hybrids from Virginia, from Cliff Ambers.
And they're all, Adam, the vines you and Wendy were helping us plant. They're experimental hybrids that are from the species Vitis aestivalis, which for us is one of the most exciting things we have growing, just because of the balance of sugars and acidity the grape has. It reportedly has really good tannic structure, and it can grow here without spray. And so that's, all those things are things that interest us in this project.
Yeah,
Sounds
I mean, I'm sitting here thinking I should record a PSA for you for like when you're trying to recruit workers, and you'll play this little video, you'll send them like a link or something, or play a little, have everybody sit in front of a TV screen, old school style, and it'll be me talking about how what you're about to do is participate in history. Like this is your hands are touching the future of wine in this country. You will be shaping the future of American wine. I could go on, and give everybody a little pep talk so that they'll be like, yeah, sign me up. I'll come dig holes and pull, things out.
I honestly don't know how we still have friends. Like people, like friends still come up and like we make them do like hard labor. We're digging like through like some really rocky soil and like
Right.
we're very lucky. But it's super exciting.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about what that specific property is like, the pros and I mean, I don't know that there are cons, but just the descriptive aspects of it and what the terroir is like.
Yeah, totally. So it's we're in Walton, New York, which is in the foothills of the Catskills. It's the western part of the Catskills. And so that the whole Catskills region during the last glaciation about 10,000 years ago, the glacier kind of ripped up a bunch of stuff and like left the Catskills behind essentially. And so during that whole process, a lot of rock material and a lot of things were moved around. And so what we were left with were these like really cool, like hills and big mountains and like hollows. And we're in one of these like mountain hollows that you drive up from kind of the base of this river valley, where the soil is this, you remember, Adam, it's kind of this like rust color. That's, all the sediment that, that comes from all that, water moving through the river valley. And so you kind of drive up and you kind of gain some elevation and you're going through essentially a forest. It's like, definitely an alpine setting.
Yeah.
And you arrive and it's kind of like an open side, like hillside, essentially. It's all rolling pasture, but it's all like some really sloping terrain. When we started hunting for property and farmland, it was the first place we actually saw, and we were like, oh shoot, like this is great. It's like south facing, it's got the exposure, it's got the slope. I somehow convinced Deanna that same day we took some soil samples. We went to the local hardware store and we were like, should we spend the $50 on the actual shovel, or like should we buy this little child shovel? And I was like, let's buy the child shovel. Like, we only need it for the soil samples. We're only here for like an hour. And so we did that and immediately regretted it, because we realized that like this soil is like extremely rocky and like
and like overlapping slate. So it's not even like you could get around some of the rocks. It's like you literally broke that shovel upon using it.
Within 1 minute.
Yeah, it started raining, and then Alfie was like, well, we're supposed to dig 10 inches down, and we could only get 2 inches. I was like, this is going to take us hours.
It was really bad.
But we have some great pictures of us collecting Ziplocs of dirt.
Yeah, so it's a very extremely rocky soil. It's all sedimented sandstone, red sandstone, and bluestone, as they call it in this area.
Is the bluestone like a kind of slate? What is
that?
Yeah,
and it's actually the material that's used to build a lot of the municipal buildings in New York City. Back in the day, the Catskills was a big area for quarries for rock material, and so a lot of New York City is built on Catskill stone.
So you get the brownstones and the bluestones.
Yeah, the bluestones. Got both stones. And yeah, that was, I've heard like people kind of say like, oh yeah, like you're farming in the Catskills, you're gonna be talking about rocks your entire life. And like, it's not a lie. Like
No.
it's, I don't know. They just keep popping out of the ground.
We
and
grow
like,
them.
I don't know how that happens. But it was definitely one of the hardest parts about doing this was the rocks, because it's like when we started seriously planning for planting, we were like, well, let's we didn't want to mess with the soil structure, and do like we didn't want to get a ripper and like rip a line. Right. We were like, we want to preserve the mycelial structure and do this the kind of less impactful way as possible. And so we're like, let's rent an auger from Home Depot. And so we did that. And like on the first day, like we were like, oh, it's going to take us 5-6 hours to drill like 10 holes. And like we
Oh
had to
my
drill
God.
like 2,000 holes. So it's like immediately we were like, oh man, how are we going to do this? And yeah, what we thought was going to be like, oh yeah, we'll do it in like 2-3 days. We'll dig all the holes. It took us like 4 weeks.
Yeah.
And it was
So
like,
so did you decide it was worth it to just own the auger at that point?
Afterwards,
we should have
we
bought
should
it.
have just bought one, but
Afterwards.
we were really gung-ho on like, okay, we can knock this out. We'll just drill holes morning from dusk to dawn, like, or from dawn to dusk, we'll just drill holes, and we'll knock it out. Like, how hard could it be? And then,
It broke us. Like it
did.
was definitely one of those
It
things.
crushed
like,
not just
Yeah.
the rocks, but our soul
our bone. Like
sometimes.
we still have
Yeah.
injuries from it. Like our hands
Yeah.
don't really work that well, but like we're slowly recovering.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so yeah, it's a very there's a lot of mountainous kind of terrain, and it's right on the edge of about 500 acres of nature conservancy land, and that's really cool because it's I remember reading about this whole idea of the edge effect, where two ecosystems meet. You have a lot of diversity in plant and animal life, and I think that's kind of what we're having, because it's like it's pretty awesome to see just every day. We do have a lot of deer, which are now kind of concerning.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
but the wildlife, black bear, fox, like the bird activity we see, like we saw 2 bald eagles yesterday, like I don't know, they were like doing some kind of mating ritual in the sky, and they were like flying in a spiral and like kind of wrestling. We're like, we see that like every day. Like it's insane.
That's amazing.
Yeah, the amount of diversity that's there. And so it's cool for us to think about this little vineyard, which also gets hammered by a ton of weather year round, even though right now is the summer. It's kind of like the gentle period, but like it's exposed. And so like the grapevines are already not as like luscious and big as some of our friends' vineyards in more gentle areas like the Finger Lakes or the Hudson Valley, where there's a little less harshness. And so like it's it comes with its challenges, especially in the winter, which is like, our first frost this past year was September 1st. So it's like, we need to find the grape variety that will ripen the fastest and will have the bud break the earliest. It's like such a crazy environment.
But I'm sure if you had early bud break, you risk it on the other side too.
Definitely.
You risk the frost on that side.
Definitely. Yeah, we had our last frost was June 6th.
Yeah, last year.
What?
This
year.
You've got wow. So 2 months for grapes.
Yeah.
No pressure. But that's why this is an experiment, and we're not here to force any of the grapes that are just like, yo, this is not where I want to be growing.
Right.
If they don't survive, it's okay. We'll figure out what does, and we'll steer those and guide those forward. But yeah, so that most of the grapes survived their first winter, which was really exciting. They lived
That's
under
awesome.
feet of snow for quite a while.
And you guys didn't like what's the word? Like bury them at all with dirt or mulch or anything?
No,
Nice. Okay.
we want to do we want to find that grape that is just the least amount of intervention. It's like,
totally.
You don't
you do. Yeah, exactly. Right. What am I thinking? I don't know.
Yeah, no, it's I one of my really good friends in back in high school and in boarding school his family ranches in Colorado, and his dad grew up in a little village in northern Mexico in Sonora, and they used to raise their horses there by releasing the yearling, the very baby horses into the desert, into this like rocky, like harsh landscape, and they would leave them out there for a couple of years or 2 or 3 years or something like that, and they would come back and wrangle them, and whichever horse had survived, those were the ones that would get like trained as the ranch horses. And I heard that story. I was like, that's insane. But also,
Right.
you know, maybe let's think about that as for the grapes. Like we
Yeah.
don't want to baby them. We kind of baby them the first year. We one of the mistakes I think we made was we used those blue cylinder vine shelters.
Oh, yeah.
And for us, in our situation, I think it was a mistake because the grapes didn't feel
The wind pressure.
the whipping
weather.
winds that come through. They didn't feel the kind of like weather that like rolls in every day.
Right.
And so I think it kind of set them back a little bit. And so this year we were like, no, they're if it works, it works.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, then we pivot.
Oh, I love it. Well, you're definitely throwing them to the rocks. 3 years in the rocks, and then beyond,
Those
the
poor
whole life in the
Yeah.
rocks. Oh, that's great.
They're very well watered. I mean, Delaware County, where we live, is the watershed, and so it's where all of New York City gets its water from, and so we're very water rich.
Yeah.
And so
Nice.
we don't have any irrigation in the vineyard. We want the vines to tap into that natural water table.
Yeah.
Plus that with the amount of rainfall we get, we think is enough to keep them going.
And also
Yeah.
those fungal challenges
Yeah.
too.
With the pros, there's some cons with the disease pressure, but we're keeping an
Yeah,
eye
you'd
on it.
imagine. I imagine. Well, I mean, I guess it's different in different parts of New York. Like you said, you guys get a little more of the coastal climate versus the Finger Lakes, which get that more continental climate. You guys could get potentially some big storms that come up from like the Gulf of Mexico, for example. You're not that far inland where you wouldn't get the edge of that, right?
Right. Yeah, definitely.
Nice. Yeah, that's amazing. And the soil looked pretty heavy too, like kind of clay, like that rusty clay,
Yep.
mostly rocks, but a little bit of clay mixed in.
Yeah, it's a silty loam, very light brown in color. I think it's pretty cool, and it changes
Yeah.
throughout the field.
Oh, interesting.
Which is interesting. Yeah, it changes colors as you kind of go, and it makes sense. Like, you kind of see some areas in the vineyard that are lower, and that's probably where water has kind of naturally. There is a part in our field where you stand and you do hear like a trickling of a stream, and there's like no water around. So I think
That's
there's like
crazy.
the bedrock is pretty shallow in some parts, and so
Wow.
I think it's just fractured bedrock and just like natural spring water flowing through. There's just there's tons of water in the Catskills.
That is nuts. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, I want to go back to that picture that I painted, which is like, this is a steep hillside. Like the fact that you have shallow water running, I mean, it's amazing. Yeah, that's crazy. Like, that's amazing. Wow. Are you documenting this in video? I mean, someday. I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever seen the video, the documentary, The Biggest Little Farm.
Oh yeah, we loved it.
Oh, we love that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like something you guys should do for wine. Like
I know.
for grapes. Like
So
it's the perfect.
I'm a cameraman. Deanna's also in film. So many of my film friends have been like, dude, are you documenting? I was like, I haven't pulled out the camera out in the field at all. Like I forget about it. I'm like focused on other things, but maybe we should.
Yeah, I mean, we take out our cameras. We like to document in photos
Yeah.
rather than video for some reason. So we have an abundance of photos from throughout the season, throughout the different friends and family who have come to visit us and to help us out on the field. So like, there's definitely like a story there, and there's definitely like a visual history of the seasons and how we've evolved and who's passed through. But in terms of like a video recording, we haven't really done much.
I think we're just too close to film production.
Yeah,
like I had a friend who was like, can I come like shoot you guys? And I was like, you're not putting a wireless mic on me. Like, no way.
We're so used to being behind the camera, Adam, that the thought of being in front of it, I think, scared us a little bit.
Yeah,
We're
no, I
just,
hear you.
it's not
Well,
natural for us.
do the documentation now. Don't worry about the voiceover. I mean, you can always do voiceover. You can always do like the interviews later and splice it together. But at least you'll have footage. You'll have like the B roll and some of the A roll that you
It's
can.
mostly just footage of farm failures constantly, like every day. Just a
That's
farm
the
failure.
whole, yeah, but that's the story. That's part of the,
That's what you
the
want to see.
challenges overcome. Exactly. Like we want to see how you problem solve. I mean, that's literally like what that whole documentary, The Biggest Little Farm, is all about. It's like
Yeah,
this problem cropped up and then this is how we solved it with natural means. And then this problem cropped up and this is how we solved it. And
yeah,
it's like you're rooting for them the whole way through because it's like farming, it brought farming to life in this sort of like National Geographic, because the guy was a cinematographer, so he had like that slow mo of like the eagle coming in to get the gopher, and like in the
So
time
epic.
lapse of snails eating like an entire orchard to bear or whatever. But you guys could like it's that idea of like the struggle of farming is real and you guys are
so
living
real.
it. We are rooting for you. um
All right, Adam, you convinced me. I'll bring the camera along more often.
Awesome. Good. Well, I mean, it is very photogenic there. I mean, like I was saying, that's what I was trying to like when you're out there working, the view is spectacular. You have this, I mean, it sweeps away, the vineyard sweeps away down into that hollow. I love that word, hollow. Like there aren't enough hollows in the world. Hollow. Um and where from whence you have pulled some cuttings from the native vines down in that hollow that you saw packed with grapes, right? And those are now part of the vineyard.
Yeah,
Some
so
of
we're actually growing three
some of
three full rows of this Vitis Riparia a wild grape that we found last year, just like loaded with beautiful fruit. Um, so we took cuttings from it in the winter, and we're growing about 150 vines from it, and see what happens.
that's
Fingers
fantastic.
crossed.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember
Uh,
when Alfie discovered those vines. He was walking out to like a fishing spot, um, and all of a sudden, encased all around him were these beautiful grapes hanging off of these vines that were entrenched around like just different trees and fauna. And he was, oh my God, look at these grapes. They're beautiful. They were untouched. They were like these perfect, like tiny little berries.
yeah.
And he was like, we should see what this tastes like, and why not grow it? And I was like, cool, let's do it. And we went out in the winter and we took a bunch of cuttings. And yeah, like he said, now they're planted in the vineyard, and we'll see what becomes of this little berry.
That's amazing. That's very cool. I mean, I had the same instinct. I just don't live there and didn't want to like do suitcase clones back to California from New
Hey, but
York grapes.
you have some native grape species out there, as probably you've learned from Matt and the North American wine press.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Vitis californica,
Yeah.
absolutely. And we have some other, stuff some native fruit bearing plants that I think might be better for Southern California. I mean, we do have, in the river bottoms here, some grapes, but in large, it ain't that hospitable for grapes once you get south of, the San Gabriel Mountains. It's pretty rough down here. Actually, north of the San Gabriels is the Mojave. The Antelope Valley is pretty intense too. um, but yeah, I'm working on some stuff. I got some stuff planned.
Yeah.
um, yeah, definitely. I mean, this is, yeah, I think that very excited. That's part of why it's very exciting for me. I'm just excited for things to be grown where they're supposed to be grown. It's really, I've just by coincidence been listening to an incredibly beautiful book called Braiding Sweetgrass, which
Oh yeah, I love it
if,
so much.
yeah, if you haven't read it, highly recommend it. And speaking of books, so you mentioned the Munson book. Can you repeat that title?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just make sure I get it right. It's a book by Thomas Volney Munson, called "Foundations of American Grape Culture,"
Okay.
and he's an awesome character. If you have time, research him. He had a big role to play in kind of saving viticulture in Europe during the phylloxera. He basically had the key role in that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
as the one of the horticulturalists who figured out that maybe we should graft the European vine with the American rootstock, which was already uh,
Resistant.
resistant to the phylloxera. So that was him,
Right.
and so he was, he was living in the mid 1800s.
Yeah.
And he was a botanist, horticulturalist in Texas, and he was already concerned at that time about the loss of North American grape species from the westward expansion that was going on at that time. He's like worried that cattle is moving to the west, and with it, our our North American grape species are disappearing because of loss of habitat. So it's kind of interesting to think about how he was already concerned about that then, you know.
Right. Yep. Um, and I guess my question, the follow up to that was, well, a two-part follow up. Any other books that have been influential, helpful that you'd recommend for somebody who's interested in learning more about natives and hybrids from North America, or the sort of the native hybrid culture of wine and wine growing?
Totally.
You know,
Yeah, there's a for those interested in grape growing in New York or in the Northeast. There's a great book called "The Grapes of the Hudson Valley," and that's written by a historian named Steve Castles, and he's been awesome in. He's been a great help in helping us find a lot of these rare pre-prohibition Hudson Valley hybrids, because a lot of them are like either disappeared or just he basically has some of the last few varieties growing in his own personal backyard vineyard, or it's much larger than a backyard vineyard, but he
like a
has a small
nursery.
vineyard in the Hudson Valley,
Yeah.
and so he's sent us cuttings from a lot of them too.
So
Uh,
they're either gone or he has them,
yeah,
basically.
yeah, it's awesome. Um,
Wow.
there's also a book called um, sorry, Adam. I'm just gonna look it up right now.
Oh no, that's good. And maybe while you're looking that up, I mean, Deanna, like, what have you guys learned? I know this is like a huge learning curve, and there are people like Castles and did I say his name right?
Yeah,
Yes.
Who are and others, who have been, at similar projects, have been working with hybrids, been breeding grapes, trying, the people, obviously, like we have whole universities in Minnesota and yeah, close to you there at Cornell, who whole programs that are dedicated to breeding these varieties in ways that are commercially viable. What have you guys learned? Like, what's been part of that learning curve? Like, have you had mentors? Have you you know you anything along the way that you've picked up, just fun stuff and whatever? What's
to-
been valuable, and
totally.
what's that been like?
One of our mentors in um, this journey of finding grape varieties has been Cliff Ambers, and he is a Virginia wine grower, and he's basically dedicated his life to finding uh, grape hybrids that can be the no spray solution for the Northeast, and like his work primarily is centered around Vitis aestivalis, and it was
Oh
through
wow.
him that we got the two varieties that you were helping us plant, Adam. That he's spent decades just observing and developing, and a lot of these grape growers, that's kind of the life that they have, is that
Yeah.
they spend decades and decades observing and
Yeah.
observing and observing. It's such a long process, and like it's been awesome to um, see him and a few other grape growers be so open to sharing their knowledge and sharing plant material and being like, yeah, like go experiment at your site, like we want more people interested in this, because this is like a really good possible tool for grape growing in America.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's really important to, in terms of like things that we've learned, you know, I would tell anyone to be as hands on as possible. You're going to make mistakes. Alfie and I, you know, jokingly say 1 step forward, 2 steps back. Because every time we try something, sometimes we feel like we're being pushed back, but it just leads you in a different direction or on a new path that then gets you to where you want to be. And you're going to make a lot of mistakes, but that's okay. That's part of the process. And like the one thing I'm really grateful for, having moved, far away from my family, far away from Alfie's family, we are really appreciative of the community that we've built here and that has supported us when we were just starting out, offering to help, offering to, talk to us about digging holes and building fences and how they put in fencing for livestock, but maybe we can apply some of those things to a vineyard. And that sharing of knowledge was really instrumental in helping us, because we would test out these different theories, or we'd have a friend come visit and they'd say, oh, why don't you just do it like that? And we'd be like, why don't we do it like that? And it's just kind of this like insight that can come from anywhere. It doesn't need to be from experts in wine growing or wine making. It could just be from your mom or dad who have their own set of to-dos and knowledge that they've learned from their family, and just like a different viewpoint that helps push you along the way. So there's no secret sauce. Every vineyard is different, every soil structure is different. Like there's no one size fits all, so you just have to kind of find that secret sauce that fits your recipe, and yeah, just be open to advice from wherever you can get it and test it out.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, like you said, just a different perspective can even if it's not somebody in your field, like it's just having a different way of looking at things can open your eyes to a whole new possibility.
Exactly.
Adam, sorry.
Yeah, that book. Did you find that book?
Yes. The book, one of the books that we read almost every day is Michael Phillips' The Holistic Orchard, because we're actually adapting a lot of his teachings to grape growing, and it's going really well. He's to us, he's kind of the Yoda of grape growing, or apple growing.
Yeah, if that is a really good way to describe him. he is the Yoda of apple growing. Michael Phillips. Okay, so his book, The Holistic Orchard.
Yeah.
Got it.
Oh yeah.
And have you checked out Mycorrhizal Planet yet?
Oh yeah.
Okay, I'm sure.
The books are like falling apart. The books are like literally coming off of my name.
That's fantastic. Yeah. One piece of advice I heard from Steve Mathiasen is don't put apple trees near your winery, though, because you'll end up getting, I forget what it is, but if apple trees are near your winery, you'll get some sort of something in the wine. I'm now forgetting now. If you listen, this is a total plug for the episode with Steve on this podcast. But he definitely had that issue. He started his new winery at these beautiful like apple trees, right? Sort of creating a ring around his winery, and then he started getting, I think it's like a kind of, I don't know what it was, not Brett. It's not Brett. I don't know. But wow. He had to.
We'll have to listen.
Yeah, he cut him down, and it went away. And it was like they discovered it because he had like a real expert who came in and like was able to isolate what the bacteria was that was causing the problem. They're like, oh yeah, that's on apple trees. That comes from apples. And
interesting.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah. Something to think about.
Yeah.
Throwing it out there.
There goes our orchard.
Yeah. Well,
thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Just put it on the other side of the. You guys probably have wild apples in the forest around you too. Why even plant?
Tons.
We do have tons, but we don't have a production facility just yet, so we'll take that under advisement.
Okay. Good. Right. I mean, you have time, not too much, but you have a little time.
Oh yeah.
Well, the sooner you have a production facility, like you could always start, buying grapes or things just to play with, and have a little experimental stuff.
Yeah. To be honest, this year we're gonna clear the old garage and do probably a wild foraged co-ferment. Maybe follow in the footsteps of Matt from North American Press and make a co-ferment grape apple project.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah. Well, I know I asked you this there, and I don't expect that the answers change. But have you named your vineyard or your little slice of your project beyond Dear Native Grapes?
We haven't quite yet. We're still trying to, you know, figure out where we want to take kind of a lot of these varieties. We're still seeing what will survive the winters, what will produce great wine. There's a lot of unknowns. And
Right.
so, I mean, we love Dear Native Grapes as like that first chapter in our story, and it
Yeah.
will always be with us, and we're always going to be searching out these varieties, right, and these species. So we're never going to close the chapter on that section. It will always be where we started, but in terms of the label, we're not quite sure yet.
I love that it started with a love letter with
Yeah.
love.
Adam.
Funny story. Every time someone comes to our house, they ask for the Wi-Fi password. And we say, well, the name is Dear Native Grapes, and the password is "This is a love letter." And they start typing it, and they're like, "Wait, this is a
Ugh,
love letter?" Like they're like,
I
"Oh, come
can't
on,
type it.
guys."
It's too long. And
Yeah.
we're like, no, we're sorry.
Like when we first made it, it was like, oh, it's all
It was
about the
cute.
grapes. It wasn't like about us. It was just about what we were doing. And now everyone's always like, oh, you love birds. And I was like, it's not us.
It's
It's
the
about
grapes.
the
It's
grapes.
the grapes, guys.
No, and that's how I meant it. I mean, I just think it comes from a great, beautiful place. So it's lovely.
Yeah.
Um, and now everybody knows if they are outside your house, they can steal free Wi-Fi.
Yes. Good luck.
Yo,
'Cause it's
yeah,
not great.
it's it's pretty slow out here.
You're better off going into town, getting a hot shot, or hanging out at the local McDonald's for some free Wi-Fi.
Well, is there any other way besides Instagram that people can follow along and see how things are progressing, or is that the main avenue
I think
at the
so
moment?
far that's where we've been kind of putting our progress.
Got it.
Gotta get around to the website. Gotta get around
It's
to
on the list. It's on the to-do
Yeah,
list.
yeah. Yeah, but that,
Big in the
like you
winter.
said, you're trying not to get ahead of yourself. So with naming and stuff, and I mean, you could, yeah,
Exactly.
you got time.
Yeah. But
You
yeah,
maybe
all this
buy the
stuff.
domain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Maybe we should. But follow us at Dear Native Grapes. That's where you can see all our progress, the fun times we're having out in the field, our challenges during winter.
Right.
Sometimes they're personal, like house renovation updates. Sometimes they're like cool articles we found. But yeah, it's all kind
Yeah.
of amalgamated there.
Yeah, I mean, the folks who did the biggest little farm, they didn't have to deal with a New York winter. I'm just saying. You got you got some stuff there. You got some material
Yeah,
to work with.
Great. I like
epic
it.
sledding.
Awesome. Well, any parting thoughts or anything? Any words of wisdom from what you've learned so far?
I mean, since this is such a project that is just barely starting, one of the things we really uh, hope is that it will open new doors and strike new ideas for people who want to grow wine and do something where maybe before there wasn't a way, and so we hope this can be inspiration or maybe just like a another tool in the toolbox,
Yeah, a
as we
resource.
as we are farming in climate change and all the things that are coming our way in terms of that.
Yeah,
Maybe hopefully this will be a good resource for others who want to try doing this too.
We hope to be a resource. If anyone's thinking about starting out with native or hybrid grapes, like please ask us for our opinions, or if you just want to gut check something, like we're happy to talk about it. We get just
yeah,
as excited as some of these expert grape breeders who have been trying to shepherd on these native and hybrid varieties for so long. They were so excited to talk to us, and now we're so excited to pass on that knowledge. So um, anyone who's
that's
interested, please let us know. Hit us up.
that's great. I'm sure you guys could probably still even use more help and knowledge as well. If somebody has an inside track on something, to reach out to you to share knowledge, to just to build that community, I'm sure is also a great thing. Yeah, and just I mean, I just want to say I think you guys are starting something really beautiful for beautiful reasons, and it feels like, I mean, I was honored to be part of it. I'll put it that way. It just felt like uh, being part of history in a real way, like in a small way, but in a real way. So it was very cool, I think. And that's yeah, I think it's really, really a good thing.
Thanks,
Thank
Adam.
you, Adam. No, this was really special to come on and chat with you about it. We really, really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed that as much as I did, please tell someone about the Organic Wine Podcast. I really do this podcast to bring exposure to the positive and inspiring work that people like Deanna and Alfie are doing with wine. And anything you can do to help spread the word would give these guys some much-deserved attention and maybe even make the world a better place. So if you have friends or customers who love wine and listen to podcasts, tell them about the Organic Wine Podcast. And if you want to support, of course, as always, please buy some wine at centraliswine.com. That's CENTRALAS wine.com. Centralis is my winery, and it's the sole sponsor of this podcast, though I am open to other sponsors as well. Cheers!